Have you ever wondered why some women seem to possess a magnetic, almost hypnotic power over men? Why they can pull, push, and twist the very essence of desire, all without uttering a single word? Imagine, for a moment, the subtle art of knowing your worth so deeply that it rattles the foundations of another's soul. It's not about games or manipulation, but about something far more potent, an awareness of self that can make even the most stoic heart waver. This is the unseen influence of a woman's ego, a force so potent, so primal, that it can break a man's without a single touch. In the delicate dance between the masculine and the feminine, there's a realm where power isn't loud or aggressive. It doesn't demand. It simply is. The woman's ego, when fully embodied, doesn't chase, doesn't grovel. It chooses. She stands unshaken in her own sovereignty, a quiet storm, as if the very air around her hums with the understanding that she is enough. And in this knowing, this internal certainty, lies the key to a man's deepest fears. The fear of inadequacy, the fear of being irrelevant, the fear of losing control. These fears, often buried in the recesses of his unconscious, are the very things that a woman with a solid ego can shatter. It's not the overt dominance that bends him. It's the invisible force field she creates with her presence, her quiet confidence. Her power lies in her ability to detach from needing validation, to operate in the truth of who she is. This is where Jung's idea of the anima and animus comes into play, the projection of our inner opposite onto the other. When a man sees a woman who radiates self-acceptance and strength, he is forced to confront his own internal struggles, his own inadequacies and projections. She becomes a mirror in which he sees both his shadow and his ideal self. And what happens when he can't match that ideal? He either becomes obsessed, trying to possess her, fill the gap in his own self-worth, or he breaks. John Bowlby, a man deeply attuned to the psychology of attachment, understood the intricate dance of dependence and independence. His attachment theory speaks to how people form bonds, but also how those bonds can be shattered. A man raised in an environment where emotional vulnerability is either a weakness or a threat will inevitably have a skewed view of relationships. His will is only as strong as his attachment, his need to control, to maintain dominance, to never show weakness. And in this, the feminine ego, in its purest form, is his kryptonite. It is in this tension, this delicate balance of power, where a woman's ego can break a man's will. When she no longer seeks approval, when she steps fully into her own light, he begins to question his own identity. If she is whole, does he need to complete her? If she is at peace, where does this chaos fit in? This internal unraveling can break even the most stoic of men, because they are faced with an existential truth they are not equipped to handle. They cannot own her, and they cannot fix her. A man who is emotionally fragile, who has not done the necessary shadow work, is vulnerable to this breaking. His ego, hungry for power and validation, begins to crumble under the weight of her strength. He is left powerless, caught between his desired control and his inability to do so. The more he tries to dominate, the more she pulls away, like water slipping through his fingers. And in this dance, the power dynamic shifts. The man, once the pursuer, becomes the one pursued, not by desire, but by his own inadequacy. He becomes obsessed not with her, but with his need for her approval. She is no longer the object of his desire, but the reflection of everything he is not. In the world of modern relationships, this dynamic plays out constantly. Men who are raised to believe that their worth is defined by their ability to control, to dominate, and provide, find themselves rattled by women who do not need them for validation. When a woman's ego is grounded in self-worth, she becomes the ultimate test for any man who wishes to enter her world. She does not need him to define her. Instead, she challenges him to rise to meet her. And this is where the true power lies. She does not manipulate or deceive, but simply is fully and unapologetically herself. What does this mean for a woman, for you? It means that the real power does not come from proving your worth to others. It comes from realizing that your worth is intrinsic. When you step into this realization, you become a force that can shape the world around you. It's not an ego in the sense of arrogance or pride. It's the ego of self-respect, of honoring your own humanity. This is the essence of the feminine, the ability to hold space for your own essence without the need to beg, to seek, to chase. And it's not just about men. It's about the world around you. The more you embrace your own power, the more you become a force that no one can resist. Because a woman who knows her worth doesn't just break a man's will. A woman's ego, when aligned with her true essence, is like the unshakable roots of an ancient tree, silent, firm, and deep. Yet in the world of man, her presence sends ripples that cause even the most stable of fortresses to tremble. When she steps into her own light, without the need to beg for validation or seek the approval of others, she becomes an enigma, a paradox, both soft and unyielding. She knows the truth of her power. It is not in what she says, but in who she is. Her ego, fully integrated, becomes a reflection of the divine feminine, an embodiment of self-worth that doesn't chase but chooses. And therein lies a rupture, a break in the armor of the masculine. The man, caught in the web of his own ego, has been taught to believe that his worth is measured by control, by conquest, by dominance. But when he encounters a woman who radiates self-sufficiency, who stands firm in her own being, his deepest fears are awakened. The illusion that he must own, control, or possess her shatters against the rock of her autonomy. The more he tries to assert dominance, the more she slips away, and the more he becomes obsessed not with her, but with the notion of her. In this struggle for power, he finds himself adrift, torn between his need for control and his lack of it. He cannot dominate her, for she is not a prize to be claimed. The psychological structure of attachment, as John Bowlby so aptly described, plays a key role here. In relationships, we are not only dealing with love or affection, we are also grappling with a deeper, more primal need, the need for attachment. But attachment is not always a simple bond of love. It can be an attachment to power, to control, to validation. When a man attaches to a woman who holds her ego as her fortress, his attachment becomes fraught with insecurity. He seeks to possess her to ease his own existential fear of inadequacy, yet with every move to control her, he only drives her further away. Her strength, her independence, her refusal to bend his will breaks him slowly, inevitably. A woman who is aware of her own worth becomes like a mirror reflecting the fractured, shadowed parts of his psyche. His ego sees her as an image of everything he longs to possess, but cannot. The more he tries to manipulate, to control, to bend her to his will, the more she retreats into her own power. She does not fight him with words or actions. She simply is. And in this being, she pulls him into a whirlpool of obsession, pushing him to the brink of emotional collapse. But what is it that breaks him? Is it her silence, her indifference, her refusal to engage in the power struggle? No, it is far deeper than that. It is a reflection of his own shadow, projected onto her. In Jungian terms, his ego cannot handle the truth of his own fragmented self. He sees in her everything he believes himself to lack, and he despises her for it. His desire for control turns into a desperate obsession to possess the one thing he cannot have: her peace, her strength, her inner calm. A man who has not done the work of self-examination, the necessary shadow work that would allow him to stand firm in his own identity, is vulnerable to this kind of unraveling. He is caught in the cycle of seeking validation from an external source. The woman who holds herself in high regard, her very presence forces him to confront his own inadequacies. And when he fails to measure up, the consequences are profound. He becomes obsessed not with her as a person, but with the idea of her, the unattainable. The woman who knows her worth is no longer just a woman. She becomes a symbol, an archetype, a reflection of the power he cannot contain. The process of individuation, as Jung would describe it, is an uncomfortable journey of confronting one's own shadow, the unconscious aspect of the self that we deny or repress. For a man who has not done this work, encountering a woman who embodies her true ego forces him into a confrontation with those denied aspects of his own psyche. He must confront his own vulnerability, his own insecurities, and his own ego-driven need for control. And it is in this confrontation that he breaks, for his own ego cannot reconcile with the truth of her strength. His desire to control her becomes his undoing. Yet this is not just a dynamic between men and women. It is a universal struggle. It is a reflection of the greater battle between the ego and the self, between the need for external validation and the peace that comes from within. The woman who stands fully in her own power is not just breaking a man's will. She is breaking the very structures of egoic attachment that bind us all, and in doing so, she frees herself, and in her freedom, she empowers others to do the same. It is not about dominance or submission. It is about alignment with one's true self. A woman who has integrated her ego fully and harmoniously no longer seeks approval. She no longer seeks validation. She is the source of her own worth, and in this knowing, she becomes unstoppable. And in the process, she redefines the entire dynamic of attraction, power, and relationships. The man who has been broken by the strength of her ego may, in time, come to recognize this truth. He may come to understand that her refusal to bend was never a rejection of him, but a mirror for him to confront the weakness within his own soul. And in this confrontation, he may finally have the chance to rebuild, not through possession, but through self-realization, through the strength of his own ego, forged in the fires of his own shadow. As the woman stands tall in the fullness of her being, she becomes a beacon, a lighthouse in the storm of male vulnerability. Her ego, not tainted by need or desperation, emanates a quiet power that echoes far beyond her own existence. Men, conditioned by society to value dominance and control, find themselves drawn to her, yet unable to grasp her. Her silence speaks louder than words ever could, her presence more intense than any declaration. And in her refusal to bend, she forces him to confront his deepest fears, the fears he has long buried, the fears that no amount of power or control can erase. It is here that the dynamics between the masculine and the feminine shift fundamentally. When a woman embodies her true self, when she stands firm in her sovereignty, she no longer participates in the age-old struggle for approval, affection, or validation. She transcends it, and in transcending it, she opens a door for men to confront their own shadows, the parts of themselves they have denied or rejected. She becomes, in a sense, the catalyst of their own individuation, the awakening of their consciousness. Her silence forces them into a confrontation with their own inadequacies, their own need for external validation. And it is only through this confrontation that true healing, true growth, and true power can emerge. The man who is caught in this dynamic may resist at first. His ego, wounded by the sight of a woman who does not need him, who does not seek his approval, will fight back. He may try to reassert control, to reclaim dominance, but in doing so, he only digs himself deeper into his own web of insecurity. His projections onto her will only intensify as he tries to make her the object of his desires, something he can possess, something he can control. But the woman who is grounded in her ego does not allow herself to be possessed. She stands firm, silent, and unwavering, knowing that her worth is inherent, that her power lies in her ability to remain true to herself, regardless of what anyone else thinks or feels. In this silence, in this detached, calm power, she begins to break him, slowly, methodically, but with the precision of a master. It is not through overt confrontation or conflict, but through a refusal to engage in the power struggles that he insists upon. She does not need him, and in this realization, his need for her becomes a desperate, consuming obsession. She becomes a prize, a symbol of everything he believes he is not, everything he believes he cannot have. And the more he reaches for her, the further she slips away, until he is left with nothing but the bitter taste of failure. This is the paradox of the feminine ego. It does not chase, it does not seek, and yet it holds the power to destroy. It destroys not through violence or confrontation, but through the simple act of being. It is an ego that is not shaped by others, not influenced by external forces, but an ego that is formed within from the deepest place of knowing. And it is in this knowing that the woman becomes invincible. Her worth is not defined by the man, the relationship, or the world around her. She chooses her path, her direction, and in doing so, she breaks the chains that bind both herself and the men who come into her orbit. The man, now broken, may find himself in a state of despair. His ego shattered, his self-worth diminished. He may try to rebuild, but the rebuilding process is not one of external conquest. It is one of internal reflection. It is the beginning of his own individuation. The process by which he comes to understand his worth is not measured by his ability to dominate, to control, or to possess. It is measured by his ability to stand in his own truth, his own sovereignty. In this, the woman's ego becomes a mirror for his own growth. Her refusal to bend, her unshakable presence, is a force that pushes him to confront the fractured pieces of his own soul. And yet, as he begins this painful process of self-discovery, he may also come to realize something profound, that the woman who broke him was never his to possess in the first place. She was never meant to be controlled or dominated. She was meant to be a reflection of the power that lies within him, a power he must learn to harness, not through force or control, but through self-acceptance and inner strength. She has shown him the way, not through words or actions, but through the very act of standing firm in her own truth. As this transformation unfolds, both the man and the woman find themselves on separate journeys of healing and growth. The woman, having broken free from the need for external validation, becomes a beacon of inner peace and self-sufficiency. The man, having been broken, begins the arduous process of rebuilding himself, not in the image of others, but in the image of his truest self. And through this process, both come to understand the true meaning of power. It is not found in control, domination, or possession, but in the quiet strength of being who you truly are. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses. As the woman stands in the fullness of her own power, she becomes a paradox of the world, a riddle, an enigma, a reflection of the untapped potential that lies within every man who encounters her. Her strength is not loud, not boastful, but subtle like the calm before a storm. And it is this strength, this quiet inner confidence, that breaks the very will of the men who seek to dominate or possess her. She is not seeking approval. She is not yearning for validation. Her worth is intrinsic, unshakable, and in this, she challenges everything they believe about power, control, and their place in the world. This is where the true test begins for both the man and the woman. In the mirror of her being, the man is forced to confront the weaknesses, insecurities, and shadowed parts of himself that he has long ignored. It is a brutal awakening, one that he may try to deny, suppress, or project onto her. But no matter how much he tries to bend reality to fit his desires, he cannot escape the truth. She will not be moved. She will not be swayed by his ego, his manipulation, or his desperate attempts to regain control. She is solid, grounded, unwavering. Her ego is not inflated by external forces. It is rooted in the core of her being, a reflection of her own truth, her own worth. And so, the man must face himself. He must face the parts of his psyche that have been built on fragile foundations, the parts of his ego that rely on the need to control, dominate, and possess. These are the fragments of himself that have been ignored, buried, and repressed. But in the presence of a woman who holds her own truth so powerfully, they cannot remain hidden. Her very being forces him to confront these aspects of his psyche, to face the shadow that he has long denied. For the woman, this is not a battle for dominance. It is not about winning or losing. It is about standing firm in her own sense of self, in her own worth, regardless of the external forces that seek to pull her in different directions. She does not seek to break the man. She simply exists as a mirror for him to see the truth of who he is. And it is in this mirror that the man sees the fragmentation of his own soul, the aspects of himself that he has long denied. He begins to realize that his need to control, to possess, to dominate is not rooted in true power. It is rooted in fear, in insecurity, in a deep existential longing for validation that cannot be fulfilled by external means. But as this process unfolds, something remarkable happens. The man, broken and humbled by the sheer force of her presence, begins a painful journey of rebuilding himself. He starts to question everything he has ever known about power, about control, and about relationships. He begins to see that the true strength lies not in the ability to dominate, but in the ability to stand in one's own truth, to accept oneself fully and without apology. And it is in this acceptance that he begins to heal. For the woman, this healing process is not hers to claim. She has already walked her path of self-empowerment. She has already confronted her own shadows, embraced her own vulnerabilities, and emerged as the fully realized woman she was always meant to be. Her strength does not come from breaking others. It comes from breaking free of the need for external validation. She no longer seeks to prove her worth. She simply knows it. And in this knowing, she becomes the ultimate reflection of strength and power. As the man embarks on his own journey of self-discovery, He may begin to realize that the woman he once sought to possess was never meant to be owned. She was never meant to fulfill his need for validation or approval. She was always meant to be a mirror for him, to see the reflection of his own soul. And as he begins to rebuild, he begins to understand the true nature of power. It is not something to be controlled, manipulated, or dominated. It is something to be embraced, something to be embodied. It is a quiet strength of the woman who knows her worth, the unwavering power of the one who chooses herself, the unshakable foundation of the ego that has been fully integrated and accepted. And in this realization, both the man and the woman are free. She is free from the need to prove herself, free from the chains of external validation. He is free from the need to control, from the need to possess. Together, they are free to create something new, something born not of power struggles or manipulation, but of mutual respect, self-awareness, and love. And in this freedom, they find the true meaning of connection, a connection rooted in the deepest part of themselves, a connection that transcends a need for approval or possession. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses. She chooses herself. And in doing so, she opens a door for others to do the same. In this choice, she finds her power, her freedom, and her peace.